Welcome to the Scaling Tech Podcast, where we help you manage your growing engineering team. Through expert interviews, we help you navigate the challenges of leading, hiring, growing, and nurturing your tech team to deliver the value your customers demand. Brought to you by agilityfeet.com, experts in staffing engineering teams in Latin America for clients globally.
I have a feeling that too often there are things not addressed because maybe you expect me to fix things because, let's face it, I am the face and the brand and I have the name and so on. So for a number of things, they were too hesitant to pick things up as a team, expecting that I would be guiding and leading actively. And I said, I don't want that. I cannot do everything for everyone, and it makes me very unhappy as well. So I deliberately stepped back even further and said, I don't want to even participate in the meetings anymore. You have them with each other. Just ask me when you want me to be there. And we are now 2 months further, and things are so much better. They thanked me in the retro just earlier this week for thanks for stepping back and forcing us to address the problems head on ourselves, and we're having so much fun now. You see, I wrote about this a long time ago.
Welcome to the Scaling Tech Podcast, the podcast for leaders of growing software engineering teams. I'm Aaron Syme, here with my co-host David Alfaro. David, what do you think is the biggest challenge when scaling Agile teams?
Well, I mean, the challenges I've personally faced are beyond the fact of finding the talent.
Right.
Right. Once you have the talent, two fundamentals. The first is how you empower the team members of the team. Mm-hmm. Without empowerment, the team is not able to grow by itself. You cannot separate yourself from them and allow the company to grow and find other people to do things for you. That topic is important for me. And the second one is similar, but it's not the same. Coaching. Mm-hmm. How you do the coaching as the company grows. At the beginning, it's manageable to do it by yourself, risky but manageable. But once you grow, how do you deal with that? So those two fundamentals were covered in this, or are covered in this episode, and I'm very happy with the answers that we got.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because scaling technical systems is hard, but there are many, when we're talking about like the technical aspects of scaling a software system, there's many engineering practices that can be applied to help teams deploy and scale software better in the cloud. But I think it's harder to scale human systems, right? And Agile does a great job. Agile methods do a great job in general of kind of like encouraging innovation and strong communication in small teams. And there's been many different methods tried for how to scale those principles across an organization, but scaling those small team principles, across a larger enterprise is really difficult. And if, as you said, if you don't have empowered teams, you don't have a way to build that into the organization. I think the scaling is going to be really hard. It's going to be limited by the manager. Or multiple managers in that organization.
Correct. Exactly.
So I think our conversation today with Jurgen Appelo, we looked at his unFIX model for scaling teams. We talked about many of those challenges, and I think it was a really interesting conversation. So let's get to our interview with Jurgen Appelo. Jurgen Appelo is an author, speaker, and entrepreneur who helps innovative organizations survive and thrive in the 21st century. He's the founder of the unFIX model and organizer of the annual conference unFIXCon, which focuses on organizational design for continuous innovation and better human experience. Jurgen's books include the best-selling book Management 3.0, as well as numerous other titles, including How to Change the World, Managing for Happiness, and Startup, Scaleup, Screwup. Welcome to the Scaling Tech Podcast, Jurgen.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for taking the time. Let's start by talking a little bit more about the unFIX model. The website, unFIX.com, says that unFIX is not another agile scaling framework, not a method, and not a process. So, what is it, and why is scaling agile so hard?
Wow, you get right to the crux of the matter.
Right to the meat of it.
I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with the frameworks that we have seen in the last decade or so in the Agile community, of which one particular one is rather famous, the Scaled Agile framework, but it's not the only one, of course.
Right.
They wrap good practices, common sense advice, things that work for certain companies in certain contexts. That's the good part, but the bad part is that I don't like the packaging. I don't like how they are offered, rolled out. Implemented is even a word that is used in certain roadmaps. And I thought I want to do the same way, but the same thing, but in a different way. How can I offer people the good suggestions from good authors and good sources around the world, but in a way that is not a framework? And then I came up with, well, actually, I found the concept of the pattern library, which is not a new thing. So Socracy 3.0 and team topologies and liberating structures and others are pattern libraries. They distinguish themselves from frameworks in the sense that they don't mandate anything. Everything is optional. Everything is a suggestion, something for you to try. And that is the key difference for me between a set of patterns versus a framework. Because the word framework contains the word frame, which implies that you have something static, something that doesn't change, that keeps everything together. I'm Dutch. We have a lot of bicycles here in my country, more bicycles than people actually. We know all about frames, bicycle frames. The frames keep the bicycles together. That's the point of the frame. And that's how indeed SAFe and other frameworks are offered. In fact, the smallest version of SAFe is called Essential SAFe. They even added the word essential before it to clarify that all of that is mandatory, what they describe. That is the frame of the
Right.
framework. So I want something different, a collection, a toolbox, a library of options, and pattern library is the best description that I have.
I like that phrase pattern library for it. And it seems very agile to me, right? It fits because and this is the challenge that I think we've all faced whenever we've tried to scale agile beyond a single team is that agile is inherently about small teams and efficiencies within that small teams. Scrum and Kanban and other methods were not necessarily designed with large teams or large enterprises in mind. And when you get to that scale, certainly, given that most managers are still and executives and engineering leaders are probably still fairly traditionally educated, they're looking for a prescription, right? But Agile is not necessarily meant to be a prescription. It's more like guardrails, I think, right? So it's hard to it's hard, I think, how to inherently see how to scale that, and so I understand the reasons people try to come up with frameworks, but I like that phrase pattern library much better. Can you talk more about the complexities of agile scaling frameworks and what are some of the gaps in those other frameworks which the unFIX pattern library addresses?
Well, let's begin with what Agile originally is, as defined in the Agile Manifesto. As Ron Jeffrey said, we were not trying to solve all the problems in the whole universe. They were focusing on team-oriented challenges, small scale software products that they where they try to improve the way of working, and it made total sense. They were not trying to improve how enterprises of 100,000 people improve their way of working. That was out of scope. But of course, that is the next thing that we have been trying to tackle in the last decade or more, because we've proven that Agile works at that small scale, been there, done that, even though for some people it's still a challenge, but that's a different story. The next question is, how do we do this at scale? But this was not covered by the Agile Manifesto. In fact, the Agile Manifesto itself doesn't scale because it relies on trust and respect and psychological safety and people knowing each other. You cannot feel psychologically safe among 100,000 people. You cannot just trust 100,000 people around you. The human brain is not wired to do that. So even though we need the same principles and values like continuous adaptation and so on, you cannot just tell 100,000 people, okay, good luck, go forth and self-organize. That is called anarchy. And anarchy has proven not to work in certain countries. We need a bit of governance. We need some guidance, some guardrails, as you said, some structure to enable self-organization. Well, I've mentioned this in Manager 3.0 long time ago, where I said the job of the managers is to put constraints on self-organization. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, but someone needs to be the gardener. Fast forward, I noticed that the way the frameworks try to approach this, with best intentions, I can be critical, but let's admit that there are good people behind them trying to do a good job. I found them not very compelling in terms of organization design. In fact, they were rather weak in their suggestions of how to structure enterprises and turn them from hierarchies into networks. As an example, we all know the Spotify model, quote unquote, which has been used surprisingly as a framework across the world. This introduced the concept of a matrix structure. The Spotify model is a matrix design. Well, if you read any book on organization design, the experts in that field have already discovered long ago that there are significant problems with matrices. When you organize yourself that way, you get a lot of middle managers who have to coordinate things among each other, because every person has a project manager and a regional manager and a line manager, and these managers will have to discuss their resources and so on. So that is a known anti-pattern, actually. And then we advocate with the Spotify model to introduce matrix structures. So I saw that the advice in terms of organization design was a bit weak. So I tried to start there with what I call the unFIX model as a pattern library. I first found some patterns for organization design. I borrowed a few from Team Topologies because these guys did a great job already identifying 4 patterns, but then I added a few more. And that was the starting point of the unFIX model, basically, because I thought, let's begin with something that everyone else does badly, which is how to put the guardrails on a network organization. And I seem to have done a decent job because it got a lot of attention, also because I offered it as a pattern library, not as a framework. And then since then I've branched out into other areas, goal setting and reteaming, and other interesting topics that people need some advice for.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about a couple of the concepts in unFIX, like crews and value streams, perhaps?
Yeah, so I use the word crew as an alternative for team. You can use team as far as I'm concerned. I don't care. But the word team has been so inflated, or maybe the opposite, devalued over the last few decades. I heard someone refer to the company of 20,000 people as a team, for example. And I thought, that's not a team, that's an enterprise. But that's how people use the word team for just about everything these days. And in a pattern library, it is important that you come up with names that people recognize, that gives them the right feeling for what that pattern is about. And I thought the word crew is closer to what originally the word team should be, like an airline crew or the crew on a ship or whatever. They work together and they get customers from one place to the other. That's what that's what crews do. So I use the word crew in the pattern language. And the value stream crew is simply the pattern that identifies the stream aligned team, as they call it in team topology. So the Scrum team, Kanban team, been there, done that. We know how that works. That is one pattern. Another pattern is the platform crew. That will be a crew that serves not outside external customers, but our own internal customers who have their own value streams and need to be serviced to do that job better with better infrastructure or whatever. One of my favorite examples, by the way, is a company in Poland where they have kindergarten on site. A relatively small company, 100 people, lots of young ones, young people, young employees with kids. And the company provides a nursery, a kindergarten in the basement. And well, that's a platform crew. You offer service to your own employees. So the people working on that kindergarten, they are the platform crew offering an internal service. That is a pattern in itself. And those are just two examples of in total 7 crew patterns that I have identified. And let me clarify just for a moment. Nothing is invented by me. I just see what good stuff is happening out there, and I take it. I credit the sources. I rename things every now and then because I think sometimes a concept needs a better name in the pattern language. But you're free to use your own names, of course, when you use the pattern. So, for example, the guild in the Spotify model, that is called a forum in the unFIX language, because a forum is a place where people get together to discuss something that they care about and that they sometimes have to make decisions about, so that they can take those decisions back to the crews where they came from. Could be a community of practice in your company, could be a center of excellence, it could be a business guild, whatever you call them. In the pattern language, we call them forums. It's all the same thing. And so I think about the naming of stuff. I think about what things are the same, what things are different. Some boundaries are fuzzy, of course. So I have to make decisions where to cut things into multiple patterns, and that's fun. And yeah, people seem to find that useful as a starting point for playing around and combining things in their own way.
Absolutely. You also place a lot of emphasis on human experience in your work.
Yeah.
You could tell us a little bit more about that and how managers can improve the experience of their team members or their crew members.
Yeah, well, it comes in 2 flavors, basically. I find experience an important concept. Actually, that's what the X in unFIX is for, the unframework for innovative experiences. That's how I came up with unFIX. And there's the experience toward customers, and there's the experience toward employees. And to begin with the first one, I think we have still a lot to learn in the Agile community when it comes to customer experience, because there's a lot of focus on product. Product managers, product owners, product roadmaps, product planning, and so on. But customers are not interested in product. Customers are interested in their experiences, and they hire products to get an experience. Like I just discussed with a friend this morning, which movie are we going to see, Barbie or Oppenheimer next? It's probably going to be Barbie, Oppenheimer next week. And that's an experience. Of course, it is a product ultimately that is being distributed and offered to people, but for me, it is an experiential thing
Right.
as a customer. And we forget that sometimes when we focus on features and offering stuff, bits and bytes and atoms to our customers, while actually they use those bits and bytes and atoms to have an experience. So I think that's an important thing. And then not only, as I said, and you pointed out, to us customers, but also our own employees. We talk about the employee experience these days, the developer experience.
Right.
One of my favorite examples is a company in Estonia, Pipedrive. They reached out to me just after I published the first version of the unFIX model, and they said, "This looks suspiciously like what we have already been doing." And so we had a great conversation. I interviewed a number of people, and this became one of the first case studies that we published on our website, because indeed they had already implemented patterns that I had identified. And one thing that stood out was they specifically chose reteaming of employees. So not to have stable teams, but instead have people rotate continuously between teams, because this improved the developer experience. This is what their employees wanted. The background story is that Estonia is a rather small market, and they have a couple of unicorn businesses there. Talking about Wise, Taxify, Skype is from there, a few others, Pipedrive, and so on. So as you can imagine, they were buying each other's best engineers, basically, and that's a race to the bottom.
Right.
So they were trying to figure out, what can we do instead of just keep raising salaries. Nobody will be happy with that. We need to offer a better experience. How can we make them stay? And they realized through conversations that developers, they wanted to choose what they could work on, instead of being told what to do by product managers. And they wanted more variety in their work so that they could roam around and move from crew to crew. So they created their own framework. They literally call it the Pipedrive Agile framework, using concepts that they borrowed from several sources, including Spotify, by the way, in the same way that I borrowed the patterns from several sources. So they came to similar conclusions, and then they created a reteaming approach that their
Mhm.
developers were very happy with. And then people stopped leaving, because it was not about raising salaries all the time. It was creating an environment that was a great experience for their most important people, which are the engineers, in their case. So I like that as an example that shows that experience is not only something that we need to care about for customers, but also internally for uh, our own employees.
No, that makes sense. That dealing with developer turnover, team turnover in general is always an incredibly important topic. And we talked about reteaming with Heidi Helfand in our second season, and it was a really interesting topic, and so I'm glad you address it as well, because it's a certain amount of team change, as we discussed with Heidi, is always going to be there, whether it's being recruited away by somebody else or just, changes in somebody's career. But
Yep.
the more proactive you are about that, the better you deal with that, the more likely you're to improve retention.
Yep.
And when you can't retain someone, deal with that disruption better
Exactly.
within the
And
organization.
yeah, and as I have, and these things just emerge over time. I mean, I was less smart 10 years ago when I published Management 3.0. I was one of those people who said, you have to keep your teams together, keep them stable. Otherwise, you ruin your velocity or throughput or whatever, if people have to go through those phases of forming, storming, norming, performing. The Tuckman model that you're probably familiar with, even though it's not
Right.
scientific, it has a point. And then later I realized, and Heidi was one of the first ones to point it out, that actually you can separate these concerns as they do with airline crews. The airline crew is different on each flight. They make different combinations of people, but they pull those people from a rather small pool, which is a larger team, but still a team of, let's say,
Right.
20, 30, 40 people. They all know each other. They know how to work with each other. They know about families and kids and hobbies and whatever. And it's like, hey, it's great to see you again on this flight. And let's catch up. Well, last time was a month ago that we were together. And so they form this bigger team, and they do the forming, storming, norming, performing at that level. They have psychological safety and trust and respect at that larger team level. So you can separate those out. You have the larger, what I call the base, which is 20, 30, maybe 50 people. It doesn't scale to 4,000, that's for sure. It is a relatively small number of people. The Agile Manifesto applies 100% to that unit, but then within that, you can make recombinations all the time, depending on specific missions that have to be done, for which you need specific talent or specific people. And that gives a whole new possibilities for how you design your small business. So that is an example of unfixing, right? This fixed idea of we have to have stable teams was because of our misconception of what a team is. Actually, a team is multiple things. It is that unit where you feel safe and respected and so on. Well, that is the larger team. And then there's the team that gets something done. Well, that's the smaller team. And there you see reteaming emerge as another option by just combining patterns in a different way.
Absolutely. All right, let's pause here for an ad break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Jurgen Appelo about innovation and management.
Building custom WebRTC video applications is hard, but your go-live doesn't have to be stressful.
We thought we were ready to launch our video application, but we discovered it's a lot harder than we thought. Live video applications are not like building other web or mobile apps. Our team worked hard out there today, but we just didn't have all the right pieces. I'll tell you what we should have done. We should have brought in the live video experts from WebRTC Ventures.
If you're building a live video application, then trust the experts at WebRTC.Ventures to help you design, build, test, deploy, and manage your custom-built application, or integrate live video into your existing application. Contact us today at WebRTC.Ventures.
All right, welcome back to the Scaling Tech podcast, and we'll continue our conversation with Jurgen Appelo. David, what do you think of our conversation so far with Jurgen?
Yeah, I've been meditating about the unFIX model, and I've noticed that when you see the description of the model, it's very explicit on something important. That is, it's focused on empowering employees, and that makes me remember Jurgen's book. I think chapter 7, when you, Jurgen, talk about empowerment precisely. In there, you mention empowerment. Two axes for applying empowerment. The first was different levels of empower maturity, the low, moderate, and high, and then authority, from tell to delegate. Has that view been unfixed by now with your experience? Is change?
Interesting question. No, I think that I still feel pretty much the same about that, about empowerment and delegating authority. And I have just a recent experience with my own team, actually, where I noticed there were a couple of problems, and not everyone was very happy about how things were going. And the standard manager would probably roll up their sleeves and to try to solve those problems. But I have written the book on Manage 3.0 and and similar topics, and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do this. Maybe the problems exist because I am here. Maybe I should just step back and let them fix it. So that's exactly what I suggested. I said, I have a feeling that too often there are things not addressed because maybe you expect me to fix things because let's face it, I am the face and the brand and I have the name and so on. So for a number of things, they were too hesitant to pick things up as a team, expecting that I would be guiding and leading actively. And I said, I don't want that. I cannot do everything for everyone, and it makes me very unhappy as well. So I deliberately stepped back even further and said, I don't want to even participate in the meetings anymore. You have them with each other. Just ask me when you want me to be there. And we are now 2 months further, and things are so much better.
Right.
They thanked me in the retro just earlier this week for thanks for stepping back and forcing us to address the problems head on ourselves, and we're having so much fun now. And I thought, you see, I wrote about this
Right.
long time
Yeah,
ago, and
I remember once Erin and we had I don't remember the specifics, Erin, but we had a situation where a developer was complaining all the time about things. And at what moment we decided, you know what? Why just why don't you go beyond being part of the problem and now become part of the solution? And you propose a solution and you go do it.
Right.
I mean, he was so used. I mean, I think that implicitly he had automatized that part of his role or job description was to cause problems or just to identify problems.
To elevate problems, but never
To
solve
elevate
them.
problems. Right. Now that takes me to another question. How do you know? Now, this is a magic question, I think. How do you know when a team is ready for more empowerment, or an employee or a person? How do you deal with that process? Because maybe you don't know up front, but you want to try.
yeah, you don't. I don't believe you don't. No, you just
Yeah. So how do you do it?
well, how do you know that someone's ready for swimming? You just push
Right. Exactly.
you just push them
Yeah.
in
I
the
mean,
water and make sure they don't drown. That's how you
right.
do that. I
Right.
mean, you can't know by testing them with an online form or a checklist or whatever. No, you just push them in and make sure that they don't drown, that there's a safety mechanism, that there's a safe to fail environment. You observe and get ready to help out when things are not working well. That's in almost any complex environment. You cannot
Right.
test
Right.
anyone before pushing them in. So that's the way to do it. I said I actually said that I don't even know if I have the right team. But we have a couple of options. Either I hire a different team, or we continue with the same team and we see how things work out, and or I do everything myself. Well, the last was not an option, and hiring a different team was far too much trouble. As far as I'm concerned, a rather safe thing to do is continue with the current team and allow them to prove themselves by pushing them in the water and stepping back and making sure that that no real drastic things can happen, because one thing I reserved for myself, I make all the payments. I still control the bank account. So anything that they spend, they want to spend, but I make the payment for whatever they want to have. And that's a very simple thing that you reserve for yourself. As a business owner, that makes sense. And there's one or two things like that I still have control of, but almost 99% is in their hands.
Well,
You
yeah.
cannot test that.
I can see how all of this comes or boils down to the fact that in the in in an agile environment, you want to create a safe environment for experimentation, and empowerment is by itself an experimentation, as we are stating it here. So it is an experimentation for you as a business owner. It's okay. I'm going to try this empowerment uh, um, a trick here and see how it goes.
Yeah.
It is not that you're forgetting about it; it's that you're paying attention, but you're letting them to come up with a solution, uh, and it might work.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I like it.
It reminds me too of a concept I think in your Management 3.0 book, Jurgen, where you talked about the Agile blind spot of the problem in Agile, sort of an unstated assumption perhaps, is that Agile is great only when the teams are great themselves, and we can't just assume that any team is automatically going to be great just by applying any agile methodology to them, right? And it's like something I've always thought about and sort of profess to people too is the idea that, like, any methodology, agile or otherwise, is not going to solve problems. What a lot of agile methodologies are good at, I think, is elevating those problems and making them more obvious. When you're seeing a blocker happen all the time, then that has to be dealt with. And if that blocker is a person, that person maybe has to be dealt with too, right? So, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you think about forming a team, and in particularly teams involved in innovation work too, because I know you talk a lot about innovation as well.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. I am of a mind that the innovative capability is not so much in individual people, but is a result, an emergent outcome of the interaction between them. And I think there is some research, some evidence backing this up. Google has contributed their share with their research that they published a couple of years ago that showed that it doesn't matter that much which people you have on a team. It matters a lot how they behave towards each other uh, when you measure them for their productivity and their innovative capability. And I believe in that. So
Mm-hmm.
you could almost say you can hire just about anyone, as long as they, of course, they have a minimum amount of experience and talent. But you don't need the best in the industry. That is such a cliche. You need good people who are pretty good at collaborating with each other, and that is the challenge. How do you enable those
Mm-hmm.
interactions between them, so that something innovative emerges? Um, I am an entrepreneur. I try stuff. I always say I'm not the best one out there. I'm pretty good at writing about it. Like the sports commentators are rarely the best sports people themselves, but they're pretty good at observing and documenting and telling everyone about what is or what is not good sport. I am in that league. I love commenting and observing and writing, etc. I also try my own stuff, but I'm not the best entrepreneur or the most innovative person in the world. But I enjoy it at the same time to play the sport as well as documenting and observing what other people do. But my real business is being the commentator, right?
Right.
The observer, so that I share what is good and what is not, while dabbling a bit in my own kitchen at the same time. So yeah, I try with my own team, and we have some successes. And some people say the unFIX model is pretty innovative compared to what else is out there. So well, I guess I should take that as a compliment. But coming back to your question, yeah, it's in the interaction of the people, and it's the magic formula. I don't have the magic formula for that. What is the magic formula for creating a fantastic garden? Well, there is some advice on good soil and nutrition and sunlight and so on, but as for the rest, the ecosystem has to do the most of the job. And sometimes
Right.
things just don't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I saw a little bit about, I'd love to hear more from you, is when you've talked about innovation beyond just IT and technology, a concept you call the innovation vortex. How and how does explain that a little bit for us, and how like for our audience is a lot of engineering managers in particular. What is their role in helping to keep the organization innovative?
Well, I think we come back to the experience thing. Let me give you an example to that maybe drives things home a bit more effectively. I was on a small airplane earlier this year in Suriname, small country in the north of South America. My partner is from there. And we went into the jungle for a couple of days because the country is 95% jungle, the northern part of the Amazon. So, of course, you visit the jungle. And we were on a small Cessna plane. And, of course, we got a sandwich because that's what you expect as a flyer, right? You go on a plane, you get something to eat. That is a standard requirement, basically. No matter how bad the snack is, you want something given to you. So yeah, we got a sandwich. And I noticed when I sat in the plane, there were only 8 people on the plane, that nobody was eating their sandwich. Everyone was looking out the window. Why? Because the plane is flying so low that you can see everything. We could literally see the birds flying from tree to tree. And then we were like, for 1 hour, we were like, whoa, amazing. Wow, this is awesome. Taking pictures and video. And then I thought, it occurred to me, why did nobody clean the windows? The windows were dirty of that plane. It was hard to take good photos with all the mud and everything on it. And I thought, this is an experience thing. This is exactly what I find important. We do the standard stuff. Customers ask for something to eat on the plane because they think that that is what they want. So we give that to them. Feature done, check mark. They have the sandwich in their hand, but nobody's actually watching the experience. What is the experience for people? They fly low over the jungle. They want photos and video to show to their families. And if we clean the windows, maybe they take better photos and better video, and more people will come next time. That would be someone with a mind for exploration and experimentation for the customer experience. So if you ask me what is the role of engineers or whatever, I think it is watching and understanding what is the real experience here, the lived experience. Our product plays a role in someone's life, but ultimately someone has an experience that is good or not. And how can we make sure that through our product we improve that experience that this product has, that enables in their lives? And then sometimes you get to very different solutions. Now sometimes we talk about that. I mean, we try a little bit with user story formats, for example, getting toward the why behind a feature, but we're not really good at it in the Agile community. Actually, there's another community called the Jobs to be Done community. They are far ahead of us. They understand that products have a job to do. They call that the job to be done, and that job is to enable an experience for someone. So this is a topic dear to my heart. I complain about bad experience all day long. Just this afternoon, when I tried to pay with my phone, with my banking app, and again, the app didn't work. And I said, I literally have to carry my plastic card with me just in case the banking app does not work. So that defeats the whole purpose of having the app on my phone. If I have to take the card with me anyway, I might as well use the card all the time.
Right.
So That's something that I try to develop an eye for experiences, how products impact me as a consumer of whether it's consumer products or business products. It does.
Right. I love the story of the dirty windshield or the dirty window on the airplane impacting the experience, because I think that for engineering leaders in particular, because if we're trained perhaps as software developers or a technical mindset of some time, it drives us to think so much about individual features and a very product driven mindset, which I guess we could say, like, thinking only about the technology is thinking about the product as a whole is better than thinking only about the technology. But if we're only thinking about the product and not the experience around it and the user's experience around it, then that's going to stifle innovation, right? The more that we think about that larger experience beyond the product, not just that a sandwich is expected on the airplane, then
Exactly,
we can think more
and the
creatively.
airplane is one example, but I can offer countless examples in software products. One of my pet peeves is invoices of SaaS products, for example. You'd be amazed at how many products on a monthly basis I actually have to log in with two-factor authentication, drill down to some billing invoicing menu 3 layers deep to get to the invoice that they are
Yeah.
obliged to give me. But they see that as enabling a feature. So yeah, ticking the box, we have an invoice available for customers. But the experience is that I spend half an hour of my time getting to those invoices and then
Right.
emailing them one by one, first saving them on my local drive and then forwarding them. And it's so easy to just send them to me by email, preferably
Right.
to an email address that I can add to the system, so it goes directly to my bookkeeping system, and then I don't even have to think about it anymore, about those
Yeah.
invoices. They go straight to the accountant. It is such a simple thing to make, but no product manager seems to prioritize this because they think in terms of product and not experience. And the product has the invoice available, so done. And
Yeah,
this is,
I hate that.
yeah,
I Netlify and Zero. It is obscure where the invoices actually are, and I forget every single time where they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
I hate them.
yeah.
Yeah. And David and I were both vigorously nodding our heads during that. As business owners, we get that. I mean, I was forwarding an unnecessary invoice just before we started recording this conversation, and then how many other invoices, I have no idea. I see the charge perhaps in the bank account, but actually knowing you know which of our accounts is that charge for? Why do we have multiple accounts, with that company, right? It
Right,
just
right.
creates all these really wasteful conversations, right, in
Yeah.
the organization. But so yeah, you're definitely
Uh,
speaking to me there.
I to mention this is that how to develop competence in organization through 7 approaches: self-development, coaching, certification, peer pressure, adaptable tools, supervision, and management. Um, the, the one that is always interesting for me is coaching, mentoring, and managing, uh, because those focuses on skills, tasks, mentoring, on career and life. So it's always interesting for me. So maybe that part in particular. So how how do we? What is your approach for incorporating coaching inside the entire process that runs our organizations?
Well, the first thing comes to mind, and maybe that's a bit off track or related. I don't know. That's for you to judge. But one thing that I noticed that I often refer to Management 2.0 is that the manager is assumed to be also the coach of people. That this is a management thing to coach and develop and support their direct reports, quote unquote. I hate that term, by the way. I think that's wrong because this assumes that the manager is in a position that they are able to coach and mentor or whatever other people in the stuff that they are doing, and that sort of reinforces a power distance, a hierarchical thing in the organization. That where you say, on the one hand, we want to empower people, they want them to self-organize, but by the way, the manager is going to be their servant leader and support them and coach them. Then still that manager is in people's heads is at another. I say coaching is important, but there needs to be a coaching capability in the organization, and I don't see that as a responsibility of the manager herself or himself. So actually, it probably would be better if it was not the manager, but someone else who was there to coach, mentor, or whatever their peers. It could be in a peer-to-peer manner in the organization. I think it is a responsibility of management to make sure that when people desire coaching or where they need coaching, that they make sure that that person is there for them and try not to do it themselves. I had a conversation just a few days ago. Is that if part of the coaching conversation is discussing the career of an employee, and that employee has set their eyes on the job of their manager, would that be something they would like to discuss with their manager? Maybe not. Maybe they want a confidant, someone who is a neutral party, to discuss these career ideas in a way that does not require the manager to be aware of what an employee would like to do. So I am all in favor of one-on-ones and 360s and so on, but I do not believe that by default the manager is the one to do all this. Also, it doesn't scale that well. I get the question every now and then of people who say, well, how can we, how can your model, where you suggest that there should be no managers on any of the crews, which is one of my a pet peeve. You don't want managers on crews because then you create territories. Basically, the managers should only be in the governance crew. And there's one particular crew that would be the management team. Then people said to me, well, how does that scale? Because you have only a few people there, and you could have 100 people in your base. And then I say, well, if you don't know how to do that, you're just really, really bad at delegating, because you're assuming that the managers have to do everything from deciding on salaries and personal development plans and coaching and mentoring and 360s and one-on-ones. Yeah, that doesn't scale if the manager has to do all that. So delegate it. Make sure there is a coach, a mentor, that there is a way to discuss salaries without having a manager decide on how much it is per person. I don't decide per person how much everyone gets on my team. I only decide on the budget. So I know how much it is in total. That's the only thing that I care about. How much per month in total we wire as salaries, as wages. But per person, I don't care as long as they're happy. So we created a system where they discuss that with each other, and they're actually going to rediscuss because they're not happy with what they have chosen half a year ago. So fine with me. I don't care, because the only thing that matters to me is the total, which will be the same. As long as they're happy about the outcome, it's fine for me. So we have to delegate a lot, including coaching, in my opinion. And I think with a very small team such as we have, you don't hire a coach if you only have 5 people. That's too much. It's a bit unnecessary. There is more peer-to-peer. But as soon as you get to double digits, probably you need someone who has coaching capability.
Let me summarize it. So it's good to delegate the coaching. So it is not the same person as the management side. Number one, because it could be a conflict of interests between the coachee and the coach. No, the coachee and the manager. It is not scalable to the coaching if it is the same person as the manager. And the third is, can I say like maybe could be difficult for the manager to draw the boundary between the management role and the coaching role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds
It's
good.
Could be. I mean, right. I mean, it is. Maybe I am so. Maybe I could be so. Maybe because I am not a coach or I am not trained as a coach, I could be so lenient where I shouldn't be lenient,
Mm-hmm.
and I could make a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to
Out
be
of the
honest,
situation.
I'm a really, really bad coach. Maybe that is
Mm.
also a reason
Right.
why I prefer to delegate it.
Right.
Because there's some
Good.
things I'm good at, but I'm pretty bad at observing people and understanding
Mhm.
and them and empathizing and psychology and sociology. I like writing
Right.
about it. I see the importance of it at a meta
Mhm.
level, but at a personal interrelational level, I suck. To be honest,
Right.
I prefer to
Right.
delegate it to someone who does a good job there.
Well, I think that's incredibly important trait in any manager, right? To recognize what your individual strengths and weaknesses are and delegate that to others. I mean, in my case, for instance, I'm not great at doing one-on-ones or keeping up with that, but I see the importance of it. So I have that delegated to others in the organization who do that better than I do. And,
Yeah.
I think the organization has benefited from that delegation, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of delegation, I want to call out, praise the comment you gave earlier about kind of stepping away from meetings and saying, don't, just invite me if you need me to this, but I don't want to automatically be there, and how freeing that is both for the leader as well as, even more importantly, the team that the leader's trying to empower. I've definitely seen a lot of benefit of taking that approach more myself, of just saying, let me know if you need me there, but otherwise, I'm stepping away from it entirely. You all can handle this without me. And I've definitely seen our team grow and mature without my loud voice in the room in a lot of situations like that. So we're reaching the end of our time here, unfortunately, but this has been a great conversation, Jurgen. I've really enjoyed it. David, do you have any final questions
Now,
before we wrap up?
just a lot of gratitude for being here,
Yeah.
Jurgen. Thank you. I
Thanks for
appreciate
the
it.
invite. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I share the gratitude as well. Thank you so much, Jurgen. And how can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about your work?
Well, one thing I was happy about when I came up with the name unFIX was that the domain name was still available. I could buy it. So unFIX.com, it couldn't be easier. I hope people open up the browser and type it in, and then, start exploring. Actually, a lot of stuff is going to happen in the next few weeks after the recording. Once the podcast come out, as I understand it, it will all be there. So make sure you check out the latest version of the unFIX.com website and reach out if you have any questions.
Excellent. We certainly will. Thank you so much for your time, Jurgen. Really enjoyed having you here today on the Scaling Tech Podcast.
Thanks, Irene. Thanks, David. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the Scaling Tech Podcast, where we help you manage your growing engineering team. Brought to you by agilityfeet.com, experts in staffing engineering teams in Latin America for clients globally. For more information on today's episode and to submit your ideas for future guests, please visit scalingtechpod.com.